Right, so Sharon Graham, the General Secretary of the trade union Unite, has for quite some time really been giving Keir Starmer the benefit of the doubt, time after time, when it comes to her union support for his party. For the party, of course, that was built by the trade union movement for ordinary working class people. And therefore, if they aren't at the heart of Labour policy, trade unions should be giving them quite a wide berth, I think. Sharon likes to draw red lines for Starmer when he pushes her limits, or appears to, though those red lines appear to shift more often than Starmer ever seems to, and so we come to what was ostensibly Labour's last actual pitch to working class people, which was Labour's New Deal for workers. The last bit of their alleged manifesto going in towards the general election that was meant to appeal to us ordinary folk. Well, the red lines were drawn again by Unite, and for the last week Sharon Graham has been quite critical of the draft plans she's seen up until now. Yet yesterday, all of a sudden, she seemed to think it's the best thing since sliced bread. So what exactly has changed then, Sharon? Other than you, yet again, being seen to be too close to the Starmer regime. Right, so Sharon Graham, General Secretary of the Unite Union, my trade union. Everybody should be in a trade union, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't criticise or hold those in charge at the executive level to account. And Graham, for me, has been a disappointment from the get-go, and she's racked up quite the resume of reasons for that. For example, when independent film Oh, Jeremy Corbyn, The Big Lie was out last year, famously banned from Glastonbury, you might recall, but workarounds, of course, were found. The whole thing is now available on YouTube if you haven't seen it already. But Graham banned it from all Unite properties, banned the film from being shown from any properties that Unite own, on the basis that it was apparently anti-Semitic, despite nothing of the kind actually being true. The film is about combating racism, combats the racism that is inherent in false accusations of it. And on one occasion, when a screening was due to happen in Bristol, a book signing by investigative journalist Asa Winstanley and his excellent book Weaponising Anti-Semitism was supposed to be going on at the same time. Yet that was also cancelled and also banned. The film and book were both heavily criticised by the Israel lobby, you see. They were in no small part responsible, it seems, for Glastonbury pulling the screening of the film. So all in all, it smacks of colluding with the lobby there. Certainly being on side with Starmer when it comes to, well, his version, shall we say, of fighting anti-Semitism. Then there was the time she tried to cancel the annual pro-Palestine Fringe event at Labour conference, placing the official responsible for it under investigation, apparently, as a result. And then there was the time she decided to apparently ban Unite officials and Unite livery from being shown at pro-Palestine protests and demos. One of her team, for it is not just she, allegedly threatened a soon-to-be-retired regional official with the loss of their pension bonus if they didn't call their support publicly for Gaza. That was in March just gone, apparently. And she's also, still at currently as time of writing, resisting being subpoenaed in an employment tribunal case in Ireland because of being accused of being a bad employer themselves. A trade union, her trade union, being accused of being a bad employer, with a guy who was returning to his post following a battle with cancer. Not just any guy at that, but the top official for Unite in the whole of Ireland, Brendan Ogle, on the grounds of his treatment and what has been said about him by union officials. Not only is she resisting giving evidence in that tribunal, despite literally being one of the accused, she's employed some of the most expensive lawyers on the planet to defend her, rather than the law firm the union retains services for in Ireland, which are good enough for anyone else in the union, but not for her, it seems. And the cost to members is allegedly somewhere in the region of €150,000 a day. On top of that, she has been accused by the Unite National Officers Group of showing contempt for union staff's collective agreements, taking an anti-trade union stance and attempting to use legal action to intimidate staff with grievances. And at least one union branch has passed a vote of no confidence in her. This was in Brighton, which passed unopposed, citing their reasons as being betrayals on anti-racism, over Palestine, harassment and dignity at work. And as for Starmer, she has consistently been seen as being too close to him, and despite comments to hold him to account and to not take Unite money for granted, she has carried on funding his Labour Party regime, even inviting him to Unite conference to speak and allegedly telling delegates there to either sit down and shut up if they attended his speech, and if they couldn't do that, then to not bother attending. But let's get to the here and now. Starmer's Labour, in customary style, has looked at its one remaining reasonable policy position on workers' rights and a deal for workers under a Labour government and have been watering it down. His new version of the deal states that there will be consultation with businesses rather than workers and the unions. This has led to Labour coming to a position of no longer apparently seeking to ban 0 hours contracts, but instead employees having a right to a contract that was reflective of their most recent work patterns as a worker. Now you can see how a business might be able to abuse that, for example, to keep someone on a 0 hour contract. They might only give them work every other week. That would then reflect the work pattern, wouldn't it? That would be ridiculous, but that appears to be how it might work under Labour. And of course you're going to get employers who are going to do that. Probationary periods were supposed to be being done away with as well, but that now isn't happening, apparently. Fundamentally, though, whilst we wait for the full paper to come out, it has changed completely. And on the 8th of May, so just 1 week ago to the day at time of writing, Unite published an article calling it unrecognisable, which in customary Sharon Graham style was her attacking Labour, retreating on the matter. It looks like all the warnings Unite made earlier about the dangers of Labour rowing back on its pledges for the New Deal for workers have been proved right. This new Labour document on the New Deal, issued to the unions on Monday, is a rowback on a rowback. It is totally unrecognisable from the original proposals produced with the unions. Unrecognisable. Workers will see through this and mark this retreat after retreat as a betrayal. This new document is turning what was a real New Deal for workers into a charter for bad bosses. Labour don't want a law against fire and rehire, and they are effectively ripping up the promise of legislation on a New Deal for workers in its first 100 days. Instead, we have codes of conduct and pledges of consultation with big business. Likewise, the proposal to legislate against 0 hours contracts is watered down to almost nothing. In truth, this new document is not worthy of discussion. All unions must now demand that Labour changes course and puts the original New Deal for workers back on the table. Strong words. She can talk the talk. Not worthy of discussion, she said. And she's carried on attacking this since on social media. The following day, she put out a tweet quoting a Big Issue article also slamming Labour's watering down of workers' rights here, saying, "This new Labour Party document on the New Deal issued to the unions on Monday is a rowback on a rowback. It is totally unrecognisable from the original proposals produced with the unions." Unrecognisable. She's gone there again. Unrecognisable. Not worthy of discussion. She really doesn't seem to like it at all, does she? She finally seemed to like people. Well, a lot of us union members would have hoped so. Well, something certainly happened to the contrary, unfortunately, because by yesterday, in an LBC interview with Fraser Knight, she came out with, well, a slightly different view, and it seems the topic that she said wasn't worthy of discussion has been discussed.
Yeah, I have to say we're open to it. I think, they saw that what we wanted to do was to say, look, actually, when you look at workers and you look at some of the detail in the New Deal for working people, it's really important that that detail is absolutely goes forward. And I think they did listen. We had the full team in there, so they did listen. It was a long meeting, and we're at a place now. The words on the page will matter. I never say we're there until I see the words on the page, but we are in a meeting where effectively everybody wanted to move this forward, and I think it was really important to have the meeting today.
And have they said they'll implement it within the first 100 days, or is that still a question that's open? Well,
that's a discussion that we're having, but of course the aim is to bring that legislation forward within the first 100 days. That's what it says in the New Deal for working people. That's what we expect. And I think a lot of the discussion today was around the importance of the New Deal, and actually the fact that the New Deal is something Labour is putting forward, and it's going to be a very, very good thing for workers. So we're really, really pleased that we've got to that position today.
They have agreed to ban 0 hour contracts and fire and rehire.
So what they've agreed to do is to go back to the New Deal for working people, so that's the MPF document, without boring you all to death, the MPF document, to use that as the principal guide. That is our touchstone, and then we move towards legislation from that position, and I think that's a really important thing.
Do you think the last week, 2 weeks have been a waste for the Labour Party in terms of some of these other policies that you did call a betrayal?
Well, look, from my point of view, my main job is to defend my members. As much as I want Labour to get into government, and I do, I think it will make a real difference to workers, I've got to keep their feet to the fire. We're not a cult. I'm here to make sure that workers get their fair share, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to keep pushing at that. And I think today we've got into a really good position where we're moving forward, and this could be a very good thing for workers.
Do you still worry that Labour are going to bow to pressure from big businesses to water some of this down?
Well, look, at the end of the day, we'll see the words on the page. But from my point of view, what's really clear is this is really good for workers and it's good for business. I represent members, 1.1 million members across the country. I do deals with employers every day of my life. And actually, good employers want to treat workers properly. And that's what this legislation is all about.
So she hasn't seen the words on the page. So she's been told stuff by presumably Keir Starmer or his team, and you've taken their word for that? You've taken Keir Starmer's word for something. You consider Keir Starmer's word worth something then, do you, Sharon? Wow, that's quite something, isn't it? Okay, so she did say she wants to see it in print, which is fair enough. But actually, from what she said in that clip, she doesn't appear to have actually been promised anything new over what she was kicking off over before. Moving things forward isn't the same as reassurance and correction. That's still quite the change in tune coming from her compared to just a week ago with her words in the intervening time on social media. The new deal is being put forward by Labour and it will be a very, very good thing for workers, she also said. But she just implied, she's just said she's seen nothing on paper yet, so how can she possibly be so sure? It got worse from there, though. Fraser Knight, the LBC reporter interviewing her there, asked her about those two things Starmer had watered down: 0 hours contracts being banned and fire and rehire. And all she could say is that, well, they'll go back to the NPF document and use that as a guideline. Will they? Really? That refers back to the National Policy Forum document, big annual policy-making conference that includes the trade unions with Labour, and that turned into such a circus when it occurred last year. Several union reps walked out of it. That's the guideline, is it? What came out of that? Farce? That's the framework? That's the touchstone, as you put it? A little bit cringe now. Got worse when you also said you've got to keep holding Labour's feet to the fire. Singe Keith's toes, as it were, if he goes too Tory, you'd imagine. Because from my perspective as a lay member of the union, you've never done anything of the sort, really, have you? And this isn't doing that either. Every time you seem to meet with Starmer or his team, no matter how vocal you might have gotten through social media or other union channels beforehand, you seem totally placated again afterwards. Yet Starmer never changes. And so far, even on this, nothing has actually changed that can be pointed to in a solid form, not even by you. You're still waiting to see the print. You've been given spoken reassurance, it appears, and you've lapped it up, to the point you're now saying to camera this could be a very good thing for workers. That what you've been told could be good for workers and good for business, when in my experience, the two are not usually mutually compatible, are they? It strikes me that Starmer has seen you coming and knows exactly what to tell you each and every time he meets you. We do need to see the writing on the page. On that, I do agree with you, Sharon Graham. We need to know if you actually have got something meaningful out of Starmer on workers' rights, whether he has moved a little bit, whether you've given him the right kind of a nudge, or whether, as I strongly suspect, nothing has actually changed at all and you've sadly made the mistake of again believing what Starmer's told you. How many more times must that happen before you actually do pull union funding from him? Do you know what makes this commentary from Graham all the more ridiculous sounding now, though? That her change in stance towards Labour's watering down of their New Deal for workers came following the week that Starmer literally welcomed a hard-right, trade union bashing Tory MP like Natalie Elphicke into the parliamentary party. Unions, off the back of that, should be packing up and abandoning Labour for welcoming Tory MPs in, even more of them, 3 now to date, with more allegedly waiting to defect as well. Not standing there and saying, he's still doing a good job and you have your faith in him, which is the impression I'm getting. Sharon Graham felt the need to gloss over that NPF documentation. I'll come back to that. What came out of the National Policy Forum, and called it her touchstone. She wanted to skip over it very quickly, though, in that commentary. Didn't want to bore us with it. Well, it's not boring. It's quite important, actually. And what went down last July in that meeting should very much be better known about, especially if that's the guidelines everything that's coming is based on. Unions went ape at Labour over it, and you're holding it up as the foundation for what comes next. Well, I think people should find out all about what actually happened there in union reactions, and in this video recommendation here, you can get all the details of that. I'll hopefully catch you on the next feed. Cheers, folks.